the widow was brought to the cathedral on her knees, because Lord Prelate Vouster's seal said a woman without honor had no need to stand before holy flame. Lenora Varrin did not correct him. Correction required someone willing to hear truth, and the Cathedral of Sleeping Flame had been built by men who preferred stone because stone could be arranged over anything. Bodies, records, promises, widows. 2 acolytes dragged her across the unfinished nave, while the court watched from black cedar benches veined with gold. Above them, red banners hung from the high ribs of the cathedral, each embroidered with the coiled dragon of House Eth and the silver thread of the coming remarriage. Tomorrow, Dragon King Calder Eth would take a new bride beneath the Ember Oath-Wall, and the kingdom would call it renewal. Today, they had brought back the exiled widow to lay the final brick. The brick waited on a low altar of volcanic stone. It was small enough to fit in Lenora's 2 hands, dark red at the edges, black at the center, still breathing faint heat, though no fire touched it. Around it, the unfinished wall rose in a crescent behind the marriage dais, thousands of ember bricks sealed together by vows from kings, queens, generals, and priests. Only one hollow remained. One empty place at the heart of the wall, shaped exactly for the brick they now demanded she place. The Ember Oath-Wall did not bless new vows because priests commanded it. It sealed only what old vows had paid. If a royal oath remained unpaid, the final brick would not close the wall. It would open it. Lenora's wedding ring tightened on her finger. She folded her hand into her skirt before anyone saw. Lord Prelate Vouster stood beside the altar in ash-black temple robes, his long face calm, his mouth thin with practiced pity. A silver trowel rested in his hand. "Lenora Varrin," he announced, "widow of Captain Arlen, Varrin, disgraced keeper of disputed land exile, of the Eastern Ash Road, you have been granted one mercy. Lay the final ember brick. Bless the Dragon King's remarriage with widow's surrender, and the temple will record that you died obedient in spirit, even if your life afterward remains outside the city walls." A ripple of approval moved through the benches. Widow's surrender. That was what they called it, when a woman gave up the last claim her dead husband left her. Land, name, roof, compensation, protection. The temple liked soft words for theft. It made the altar smell cleaner. Once the brick was laid, Arlen's land would become cathedral ground. His unpaid protection claim would become temple property, and Lenora's last legal hold on his name would be buried inside holy stone. Lenora looked at the brick. "If I refuse," Vouster's eyes did not change. "Then your husband's grave tithe is revoked. His ashes will be removed from the soldier vault before sundown." For the first time, something in her nearly broke. Not because they threatened her. She had slept through winter with temple men, checking whether hunger had made her reasonable. She had endured market women spitting ash at her hem because Vouster's sermons named her an ungrateful widow. She had watched her husband's land fenced, measured, and swallowed by cathedral foundations, while the court said grief had made her confused. But Arlen's ashes were the last place the world admitted he had lived. Lenora rose without permission. The acolytes grabbed her arms. She did not fight them. She only lifted her head toward Vouster. "My husband died carrying the king's left flank at Red Hollow, and was honored for it. He was owed protection." Vouster's smile thinned. "He was owed burial. He received it." Lenora's ring burned again. A line of heat climbed from the gold band into her palm. Not enough to wound, enough to remind. Arlen had pressed that ring into her hand 3 nights before the battle, laughing softly, because it was too plain for the wife he claimed deserved better. After he died, Calder Eth himself had stood over the battlefield, dead blood on his armor, dragonfire in his eyes, and spoken words Lenora had never been allowed to repeat in court. "By my flame, his widow will not be cast out." Then the reports vanished. The witness captain was transferred north. Vouster took charge of burial records, and Lenora Varrin became a troublesome woman asking for a promise no one admitted hearing. A horn sounded outside the cathedral. The court rose as one. Dragon King Calder Eth entered beneath the unfinished arch, and the sleeping flames in the wall stirred before he crossed the threshold. He was taller than Lenora remembered, or perhaps grief had shrunk every memory that did not hurt. Black hair fell around a face built for command rather than comfort. His armor was dark dragon scale edged, with old battle gold, and a line of ember wire had been braided through his hair in preparation for tomorrow's vow. The court bowed. Fauster lowered his head. Lenora remained standing because no one had ordered her down fast enough. Calder saw her. Not the way nobles saw her as a stain brought back for ritual use. Not the way priests saw her as an obstacle to be folded into holy language. His gaze stopped first on her face, then on the hand she kept hidden in her skirt. Her ring burned harder. For one breath, the wall behind the altar gave a low sound, like stone remembering thunder. Fauster spoke quickly. "Your Majesty the Widow has agreed to complete the surrender brick." "I have not," Lenora said. The court stiffened. Calder's eyes moved to her. There was no softness in them, only a dangerous stillness the kind men mistook for indifference, because they had never stood close enough to see restraint. Fauster's voice sharpened. "She will." He took Lenora's wrist and pulled her toward the altar. The ring flared. The final ember brick ignited. Flame shot up in a narrow column, red at the edges, white at the heart. Every candle in the cathedral went out. Acolytes fell back. Lenora's hand was still in Fauster's grip, but the heat did not burn her. It burned him. The prelate hissed and released her, his palm marked with a black circle where her ring had touched him. Calder stepped down from the aisle. "No priest touches her again." The words did not rise. They fell, heavy enough that every acolyte near Lenora stepped back, as if the cathedral floor had split beneath their feet. Fauster folded his burned palm into his sleeve. Majesty grief often wakes cheap charms in widow metal. Calder's gaze did not leave Lenora's hand. What is on her hand? Lenora looked at the Dragon King. She had imagined this moment too often in exile, and never once had she imagined how tired he would look beneath his crownless war braid. The ember wire in his hair glowed faintly, but the light along it stuttered, as if something inside him could not sleep. She lifted her hand. Her wedding ring had turned from dull gold to living coal. "I carry what was left to me after your court took land, roof, and oath." A murmur moved through the nave. Calder's jaw tightened. "What oath?" Fauster stepped in before she could answer. "A land dispute, Majesty. Settled by temple review." Lenora did not look away from Calder. "An oath." The Ember Oath-Wall groaned. This time everyone heard it. A crack opened above the empty place where the final brick should have gone. Not wide, not yet, but deep enough for red gold light to spill through the stone like blood through cloth. Fauster went pale. Calder stared at the wall. Lenora picked up the ember brick with both hands. It was hot. It was heavy. It felt less like stone than a heart pulled from an old battlefield and kept beating under ash. "The wall wants the last brick, Fauster," said recovering. "Place it." Lenora turned to him. "No." The word was quiet. It carried. She stepped away from the altar, holding the brick against her chest. The remarriage construction stops until the old vow is completed first. A gasp crossed the court. Fauster's face hardened. "You have no standing to halt a royal vow." The crack in the wall widened. From inside the Ember Oath-Wall came a voice made of battlefield smoke, dragon fire, and a dying soldier's last breath. Calder Eth swore it. The Dragon King stopped moving. The wall opened farther, and inside the stone written in flame the buried oath began to burn before every witness the temple had tried to keep away. Stone dust fell over the marriage dais like gray snow. No one in the Cathedral of Sleeping Flame moved toward the wall. The red gold fissure widened by a finger's breadth, and heat rolled from it in slow breaths, not wild enough to burn the benches, not gentle enough to be mistaken for blessing. Lenora Varrin stood beneath it with the final ember brick clutched to her chest, feeling its pulse answer the ring on her hand. Lord Prelate Vouster Sile found his voice first. "Seal the fissure." The acolytes hesitated. Calder Eth did not look away from the burning stone. "No one seals anything." The command cut through the nave. Vouster's mouth tightened, but he bowed as if obedience had been his intention all along. Lenora did not trust that bow. Men like Vouster never surrendered power. They folded it smaller and hid it in a sleeve. Inside the wall, the buried oath burned brighter. The words formed slowly, each line dragging itself out of stone, as if the cathedral hated giving it back. "By my flame, the widow of Captain Arlen Varrin shall not be cast out." A sound passed through the benches. Not pity. Alarm. Pity was cheap. Alarm meant the sentence had consequence. The wall burned on. "Her roof shall stand under royal protection. Her land shall not be seized by Temple Crown Bride House or debt court. Her husband's grave tithe shall be paid from the war chest. Compensation owed under royal flame shall pass to her hand, not to priest or steward." Lenora's grip tightened around the brick until its corners dug into her palms. There it was. Not memory, not grief. Debt. The old vow had named roofland, grave, and compensation. Everything Vouster had stripped from her with documents, sermons, and hungry smiles. Everything Calder's court had pretended was confusion from a widow who could not accept loss. Calder stood very still. His face had gone hard in the way of a man struck where armor did not reach. "I remember speaking those words." Lenora looked at him. Then why did no one else remember them? His jaw flexed. Vouster stepped forward before the question could sink deeper. Because battlefield speech is not binding unless recorded by temple witness before burial. The law is older than this wall. A king may speak grief over the dead. He may promise comfort. But flame debt requires temple inscription, witness seal, and burial entry. Without those, it is not oath. It is mourning. The court latched onto the distinction at once. Mourning was harmless. Mourning did not return land. Mourning did not halt a remarriage cathedral. Mourning did not make priests thieves. Lenora turned from Calder to Vouster, then read the witness seal. Vouster's eyes sharpened. "There is none. The wall says there was payment owed. Read who sealed the record shut." A hush fell. Vouster's burned hand disappeared deeper into his sleeve. Lenora saw it. So did Calder. The Dragon King descended the last step to the nave floor, slow enough that every movement looked controlled, though the ember wire in his hair flickered uneasily. "Read it." Vouster's expression chilled. "Majesty the widow is manipulating holy architecture through grief metal. If you let her command the wall, tomorrow's remarriage vow will stand under suspicion." Lenora lifted the final brick. Tomorrow's vow already stands under unpaid flame. The wall groaned again, lower this time, like foundations shifting beneath the cathedral. Calder looked at the brick in her hands. "What is that?" Vouster answered too quickly. "The final surrender brick. Every remarriage cathedral requires one act of relinquishment. Hers was chosen because her land completes the eastern foundation." Lenora looked down at the brick. The heat inside it changed. The black center flushed red and markings surfaced along one edge. Not blessing marks, not construction script, legal script, temple hand, widow transfer, grave tithe release, land absorption, protection claim extinguished. Her stomach turned cold. Vouster had not brought her here only to humiliate her. He had brought her to finish the theft with her own hands. If she placed the brick into the Ember Oath, Wall Arlen's land would become cathedral ground forever. His grave would pass under temple control. Calder's unpaid oath would be buried beneath the new royal marriage vow, not forgotten by accident, but sealed by Lenora herself as if she had consented. The wall had not demanded the last brick, because it wanted her obedience. It had opened because the brick was trying to bury an unpaid royal debt. Lenora stepped back from the hollow in the wall. Valstor's voice hardened. Place it. No. Your husband's ashes. Do not put his name in your mouth to steal what he died protecting. The words cracked across the nave sharper than a slap. For the first time, Calder turned fully toward her. Something moved through his eyes. That was not attraction. Not yet. And not forgiveness. Recognition, perhaps. Of courage standing where grief should have been easy to break. Valstor lifted his silver trowel. The widow refuses lawful surrender. Record defiance. An acolyte reached for a black slate. Calder's voice stopped him. Record nothing until the wall answers her question. Valstor went very still. Lenora faced the fissure. She did not ask Calder to save her. She did not ask the court to believe her. She lifted her burning ring toward the open stone and spoke as calmly as she could. Red, who sealed the record shut. The cathedral answered. Flame ran down the fissure into the floor. It crossed the dais, split around Lenora's feet, and struck the unfinished foundation beneath the eastern wall. The black stone there cracked open in a long, jagged line. A buried mark glowed below. Not temple script. Military oath mark. Calder's face changed. Captain Edrin Holt. Valstor's mouth went white. Lenora knew the name. Every widow from Red Hollow did. Edrin Holt had stood beside Calder when the vow was spoken. He was the witness captain, Valstor, claimed had been transferred north before burial records were sealed. The foundation cracked wider. Inside the unfinished cathedral stone beneath the place where tomorrow's bride would walk, Captain Edrin Holt's oathmark burned like a buried brand. He had not been transferred north. His witness had been buried under the cathedral. An acolyte dropped the black slate before anyone screamed. It struck the nave floor and split down the center, the sound small compared to the groan rising from the cathedral foundation. Dust rolled out from the cracked eastern stones. Red gold light pulsed below the marriage. Dais not bright like celebration, but deep and slow like a coal buried under a soldier's ribs, long after battle should have gone cold. Lenora Varrin did not move toward it. Not yet. The final ember brick remained in her hands warmer now, its legal script crawling across the surface in thin black lines. Widow transfer, land absorption, protection claim extinguished. Every mark on it had been written to make surrender look clean. If she had placed it where Valstor wanted, the wall would have swallowed Calder's unpaid oath under the new marriage vow, and no one would have called it theft again. Calder Eth stared at the glow beneath the foundation. Open it. Lord Prelate Valstor Sile turned on him too quickly. Majesty, that foundation holds consecrated flame. To break it before a royal remarriage is to declare the cathedral unfit for vow work. Calder's eyes did not leave the cracked stone. It already declared itself unfit. A few nobles drew sharp breaths. Temple insult was dangerous. Temple insult inside a half-built remarriage cathedral was almost war. Valstor knew it. His burned hand stayed hidden in his sleeve, but his voice recovered its clean, cold edge. A military oathmark is not a living witness, he said. It may prove a captain stood somewhere near a vow. It does not prove temple record. It does not bind land. It does not reverse widow surrender. Lenora looked at him. Then why did you bury it? The question struck the nave harder than Calder's command. Valstor did not answer. Lenora stepped toward the cracked foundation. The acolytes nearest her shifted as if to block her path, then remembered the king's warning and stopped. No priest touched her again. But their fear was not obedience to justice. It was obedience to power. She knew the difference. Calder came beside her close enough that she felt heat from his armor, not close enough to take the brick from her hands. His restraint unsettled her more than force would have. 2 years of hunger had taught her how to resist men who grabbed. It had not taught her what to do with a king who finally waited. What does the wall need? He asked. Lenora's throat tightened. Do not ask me as if I serve it. I am asking because it answered you. No. She lifted the ember brick between them. It answered the debt. That landed. She saw it in his face. Calder looked at the brick, and something like shame moved beneath his severity. "Then tell me what the debt requires." Lenora turned back to the foundation. "Read the mark," Voustor snapped. "The widow has no authority to command foundation flame." "The widow holds the unpaid claim," Lenora said. "You named me surrender holder when you dragged me here. Do not regret your own law too late." The wall gave a low pulse, almost approval. Lenora knelt before the cracked stone. Not because Voustor had forced her down, because the mark was below her and she would not let anyone else decide what it said. She set the ember brick on the floor beside her, then pressed her wedding ring to the glowing fissure. The heat rose through her bones. For one breath she smelled red hollow. Wet ash, split shields, burned grass after dragon fire, men calling for water mother's gods, Arlen's hand slipping from hers in memory, though she had never reached him in time. Then another voice cut through the battlefield smoke, younger than Calder's voice, now raw with command and grief. "Captain Edrin Holt, mark this before flame and dead. Arlen Varrin carried my left flank. By my flame his widow will not be cast out," the foundation answered. A strip of black iron rose from the crack, glowing at the edges. Not a body, not a relic for mourning. A captain's oath plate, the kind pressed into war clay when battlefield vows had to survive blood, rain, and priests arriving too late. Across it burned Edrin Holt's command mark. Beneath the mark, a second line appeared. "Recorded before burial." The nave went silent. Voustor's face lost all color. Lenora looked up slowly. "You said it was not recorded." No one came to Voustor's aid now. Not openly. Even the nobles who had smiled at Widow's surrender understood the shape of the trap. The oath had been valid. Temple law had not failed to receive it. Someone had received it, sealed it, and hidden the proof under the very cathedral built on Lenora's land. Calder's voice was low enough to be dangerous. "Who took this plate from the warfield?" Voustor's mouth moved once before sound came. Records passed through many hands after Red Hollow. "Name the hand." The Ember Oath-Wall flared. "Not memory. Debt." The oath plate turned in the air without being touched, and on its underside temple script burned open. Lenora read it before Voustor could step forward. "Accepted into burial custody by Lord Prelate Voustor Sile." A murmur tore through the court. Voustor lifted both hands. "For preservation." The widow's land lay in the path of holy expansion. Had we released the claim, the cathedral would have failed. The king required remarriage. The kingdom required renewal. One widow's holding could not outweigh royal stability. "One widow's holding," Lenora repeated. Her voice was quiet enough that the court had to lean toward it. "My husband's land. My roof. His grave tithe. His compensation. His king's vow. You folded them into stone and called it renewal." Calder looked at her then, and whatever passed through his eyes was too naked to be comfort. Guilt, yes, but also recognition of the fact that his failure had become architecture. His forgotten oath had walls now. Priests, benches, banners for a bride who would stand tomorrow on stolen ground. "I did not know," he said. Lenora rose with the oath plate burning between them. "You should have." The words struck him cleanly. He accepted them. Voustor did not. Majesty, remove her. She has disrupted holy construction, insulted temple custody, and awakened foundation flame without sanction. If she will not surrender willingly, the brick can be placed by priest hand. Lenora turned. The final ember brick had moved. It no longer lay where she left it. It had slid across the black stone to the open hollow in the wall, dragging sparks behind it. The surrender script on its surface burned brighter, hungry, ready to seal what remained unpaid. Voustor smiled. The wall still requires completion. Lenora stepped toward the brick, but the oath plate in her hand blazed white-hot, stopping her. Inside the Ember Oath-Wall, the buried flame spoke again. If Widow Hand lays surrender before debt is paid, the old oath dies sealed. Calder went still. Voustor's smile widened. The brick lifted from the floor by itself. and turned toward Lenora's hands waiting to be taken. Calder's gauntlet struck the altar hard enough to split the silver trowel lying across it. Every priest in the nave flinched. Lenora did not. Her eyes stayed on the ember brick as it hovered between her and the hollow in the wall, its surrender script crawling like black worms beneath the red heat. The thing wanted her hands. Not because it honored her grief, because the law Vouster had built needed the injured woman to make the theft look willing. Lord Prelate Vouster Sile recovered quickly. Majesty, do not interfere with temple completion. The wall has named the consequence. If the widow refuses lawful closure, she refuses the king's renewal before the entire court. Calder turned on him. No one forces her hand. The words were quieter than his blow against the altar. More dangerous. An acolyte who had stepped behind Lenora went still. Another lowered his eyes and backed away. The court watched Calder with new calculation, because this was not a king defending a woman from insult. This was a king halting the machinery of his own remarriage in front of bride house witnesses, temple officials, and nobles who had already brought gifts for tomorrow's vow. Lenora felt the weight of that choice. She also knew it was not enough. Protection could stop a hand. It could not repair an oath. And she had not survived exile to become another reason men praised Calder for doing what should never have needed doing. She lifted her ring toward the wall. Read what payment means. Vouster snapped. The wall has read enough. No, Lenora said. It has read what you hid. Now it will read what is owed. The Ember Oath-Wall answered with a low red pulse. Calder looked at her and she saw the question in his eyes. Not disbelief. Restraint. He was learning painfully that the vow did not belong to him simply because his mouth had spoken it. It belonged also to the widow who had carried its absence in hunger, cold, and public shame. The oath plate floated above the cracked foundation. Flame ran from Captain Edrin Holt's mark into the open wall. Words began to form not across the high stones this time, but low along the unfinished floor where the cathedral had swallowed Lenora Varrin's land. First, debt roof restored or equal holding granted. Second, debt land returned or land value paid under royal flame. Third, debt grave, tithe secured beyond temple seizure. Fourth, debt soldier compensation placed into widow hand. Fifth, debt. Public correction of dishonor spoken, where dishonor was made. The court shifted uneasily. These were not poetic obligations. They were legal wounds with prices attached. Voustor's eyes narrowed. Impossible. The land is already consecrated. Temple ground cannot be broken, once touched by sleeping flame. Lenora turned to him. Then why did you need my surrender? A silence opened. Calder's gaze cut to Vouster. The prelate's mouth thinned. Custom. Purity of record. No, Lenora said. Payment. The wall would not accept stolen ground unless the widow holder surrendered the debt. That is why I was dragged here. Not to bless a remarriage. To erase the price beneath it. The ember brick trembled. The black script across its surface flared protection claim extinguished. Lenora took one step toward it. Calder's hand moved, then stopped before he touched her. She noticed. So did Vouster. So did half the court. The pause mattered more than the instinct. Calder wanted to shield her from the brick, but the choice could not be his. Lenora reached out. The brick dropped into her palms. Pain shot through her fingers, but she held it. The wall roared. For one breath, every banner in the cathedral burned from red to white and back again. The surrender script climbed her wrists like hot ink searching for consent. She did not give it. She pressed the brick against her wedding ring instead. The ring flared and the black script recoiled. Vouster's composure cracked. Do not corrupt temple record. Lenora looked at him. I am correcting widow record. She carried the brick not to the visible hollow above the marriage dais, but to the cracked foundation where Edrin Holt's oath plate hovered. The ember in the brick fought her, pulling toward the high wall. It wanted the grand place, the public place, the place where tomorrow's bride would stand and smile over buried debt. Lenora forced it lower. "There," she said. Calder followed her gaze. Beneath the broken floor, almost hidden under mortar and ash, another hollow glowed. Smaller, rougher, not shaped for ceremony, shaped for settlement. Voustor moved so fast his robes snapped around him. "Stop her." No priest moved. His face went red with fury. "She is destroying a royal cathedral." Lenora knelt before the lower hollow. "No, I am refusing to build it over my husband." The brick shook violently in her hands. The surrender script burned through her skin, and for a moment she saw the life Voustor had written for her exile, made permanent Arlen's ashes, moved her land renamed as Temple Ground, her name recorded as consenting widow. It was a future without chains, because the lock would be inside the record. She nearly dropped the brick. Then Calder knelt beside her, not touching, not leading, just lowering himself to the same broken floor, before the same unpaid debt. "What does it need from me?" he asked. Lenora's voice came through clenched teeth. "Not apology." His face tightened. "Flame," she said. "Royal flame. Not to bless it, to pay against it." Voustor laughed harshly. "If he puts royal flame into a widow claim before remarriage, the bride house can withdraw. The temple can declare tomorrow's vow unstable. The council can challenge succession terms." Calder did not look away from Lenora. "And if I do nothing?" She met his eyes. "Then you keep the cathedral and lose the oath." The words settled between them like a blade laid flat. Calder drew his dagger and cut across his palm. The court gasped. Voustor's face went blank with horror. Majesty Calder pressed his bleeding hand over the brick in Lenora's grasp. Dragon fire, deep red and gold, poured from his blood into the ember. It did not burn her. It burned the surrender script. One line at a time, Voustor's legal marks blackened and peeled away. The brick changed shape. Not a surrender brick now. A debt brick. Lenora guided it toward the lower hollow. The cathedral shook as if the whole building wanted to refuse the correction. Then the Ember Oath-Wall spoke again. First payment accepted. The brick locked into the foundation. Above the marriage dais, the visible hollow remained open. Voustor stared at it, breathing hard. Lenora looked from the sealed lower brick to the unfinished wall. There are 4 debts left. A crack split across the bride house banners overhead. And from the dark behind them a woman's voice said, "Then perhaps the king should pay them before he comes to my wedding." A silk screen fell from the bride house balcony and struck the cathedral floor with a soft, expensive whisper. Behind it stood Lady Ismera Thorne, the woman chosen to become Calder Eth's new queen by nightfall tomorrow. She wore pale gold vow silk, not yet the red of marriage flame, and her hair had been braided with small black pearls from the western coast. She was beautiful in the careful way court women were trained. To be beautiful, no wasted movement, no unmeasured glance, no fear shown, unless fear could be useful. Her eyes were fixed on the open hollow above the marriage dais, not on Lenora, not even on Calder, on the place where her future had failed to close. 4 debts left, Ismera said, and 1 bride house contract standing over an open wall. Voustor Sile recovered faster than anyone should have. "My lady, this disturbance is temporary. The widow has awakened a partial debt, nothing more. The king has made first payment. The ceremony can proceed, once temple order is restored." Lenora looked at him. Temple order buried a witness under the foundation. Voustor's face sharpened, and widow grief has learned to speak like treason. Calder stepped between them before the acolytes could shift closer. His bleeding hand still smoked from the first payment dragon fire, leaking in thin red gold threads down his wrist. Careful. 1 word. Voustor went still. Lenora did not mistake that for victory. The prelate had already shown he could hide an oath under stone. Men like that did not need open command to be dangerous. Lady Ismera descended the side stair, her attendants following in pale silence. When she reached the broken foundation, she stopped far enough from Lenora to avoid insult and close enough to be heard without raising her voice. "What are the remaining debts?" she asked. Valster answered before Lenora could. "Temple matter." Ismera's gaze cut to him. "I asked the widow holder." The knave shifted. Lenora felt the title strike the room. Widow holder. Not exile. Not defiant woman. Not obstacle. A legal position spoken by the king's intended bride before every witness Valster had tried to control. Lenora lifted the oath plate. Flame crawled along Captain Edrin Holt's mark, then spilled across the floor in 5 thin lines. One had gone dark, where Calder's blood had paid the first measure into the lower hollow. 4 still burned. "Land value under royal flame," Lenora said. "Grave tithe beyond temple seizure. Soldier compensation into widow hand. Public correction of dishonor where dishonor was made." Ismera's expression did not soften. "And the roof first payment accepted," Calder said. "Not completed." Lenora looked at him. He understood the correction in her silence and amended himself before she spoke. "Begun," he said. "Not completed. That mattered. Valster saw it matter and hated it." "The bride house has no quarrel with proper settlement," Ismera said. "But if widow land was folded into cathedral ground, it appears in my marriage transfer." Lenora's ring burned cold. Valster's eyes flicked once toward the western registry table. "A fear tell. Small. Enough." Lenora turned toward the table. "Bring the bride house ledger." Valster's voice snapped. "No." The answer came too quickly. Calder looked at him. "Bring it. My king bridal transfer records are sealed until vow completion. The wall is open. The wall is being manipulated." "By debt," Lenora said. She walked to the registry table herself. No acolyte stopped her. The warning Calder had given still hung in the nave like a drawn blade. Yet, Lenora did not want protection to become permission. She did not ask Calder to open the ledger. She took the black clasp in her own hand and pressed her burning wedding ring against it. The clasp flared red, then opened. Inside, the bride house ledger pages shifted by themselves until they reached a map drawn in temple ink. Lenora saw the eastern hill, the ash orchard, the well. The narrow roofline of the house Arlen had built before war took him back. Her throat closed around a sound she refused to make. The land had not merely been taken for cathedral expansion. It had been listed as vow stability property in Ismera's marriage contract. A bride gift, a political anchor, a dead soldier's widow right, had been polished into a foundation dowry. Ismera's face went very still. That land was given under temple guarantee. Valster spread his hands. A lawful transfer after surrender. Lenora lifted the final ember brick shard mark toward the page. There was no surrender. The map ignited. Not to ash, to truth. Black temple ink peeled back, revealing older red boundary lines beneath. Arlen Varrin's mark, Lenora's widow claim. Calder's protection oath running around both like a ring of flame. The Ember Oath-Wall spoke from behind them. Second debt named. The open wall spilled light across the ledger. Words burned over the map. Land converted before surrender. Bride house contract built on unpaid flame. Ismera looked at Valster then, and for the first time calculation became anger. "You put stolen ground into my vow." Valster bowed his head. "I secured stability. You made me stand on theft." He did not deny it. Lenora closed the ledger with both hands. The old vow is not memory. It is debt. And every hand that spent it must be read. Calder looked at the map, then at the unfinished cathedral rising over it. His guilt had changed shape. It was no longer the shock of a forgotten promise. It was the heavier knowledge that his silence had become useful to everyone who wanted something. "What pays the second debt?" he asked. The wall answered before Lenora could. "Return what can stand. Repay what cannot." Valster's composure cracked. If the king returns that ground, the cathedral loses its eastern support. A low rumble passed through the nave. Stone shifted overhead. The eastern wall built on Lenora Varrin's stolen land began to split from foundation to arch. A priest screamed. Dust rained over the bride house benches. Ismera stepped back, but Lenora stepped forward. Calder reached toward her, stopped himself, then moved beside her instead. The wall spoke again. Let the widow choose land, restored or cathedral debt paid in royal flame. Vauster's face turned white. Lenora looked at the cracking eastern wall, the house she had lost beneath it, and the king whose vow had arrived years late. Then the foundation under the bride's path opened, revealing a black stair descending into the ground where Arlen's roof should have stood. A rush of cold air came up from beneath the bride's path. It did not smell like holy flame. It smelled like rain-rotted wood, old soot and earth that had once known a hearth. Lenora Varrin stood at the edge of the opened foundation, while the court drew back from the descending steps, as if grief itself had become a place they could fall into. The pale stones of the marriage aisle had split cleanly, revealing rough, black stairs cut below the cathedral floor. No temple lantern burned there. No blessing mark guarded the entry. Whatever lay beneath had not been consecrated, it had been hidden. Lord Prelate Vaustor's sigh moved before anyone else found courage. No one descends. The lower foundation is unstable. Lenora looked at him. Because it was built over stolen ground. Because holy architecture has depths unsuitable for widows and court spectators. Lady Ismera Thorne's voice was cool. If my wedding path rests over unsuitable depths, Prelate, I would like to know before I walk it. That turned half the court toward her. Ismera did not flinch. Her anger remained polished, but no less sharp for it. Calder Eth stepped to the opened aisle. The ember wire in his hair flickered again, reacting to the unfinished debt below. I will go first. No, Lenora said. The word stopped him. Not because she held power over him, because he was beginning to understand where he had none. Lenora lifted the oath plate. Its edges burned red in answer to the stare. This was my husband's land, my roof, my claim. If anyone walks first, it will be the widow holder. Vauster's mouth tightened. You enjoy that title too much for a grieving woman. Calder turned his head. No more, he said. Vaustor lowered his eyes, but hate moved through his face before obedience could cover it. Lenora descended. The first steps were slick with dust. The ember brick mark in the foundation above cast just enough light for her to see the walls, not carved stone, but packed earth, braced by timber beams. Her breath caught. One beam still carried a knife-cut mark near the base, 2 crossed lines and a crooked crescent. Arlen had carved that mark on their doorframe the first winter, after their marriage, laughing because he said even a poor house needed a crest if love was stubborn enough. The cathedral had not merely taken the land. It had built over the house. Calder reached the step behind her and stopped at the sight of the beam. He said nothing. That was wise. Any comfort spoken too soon would have been another theft. The chamber below opened low and wide. Broken roof tiles lay under a skin of mortar. A hearthstone sat half buried in ash. Temple survey tags hung from pieces of Lenora's old home, naming them foundation material. Eastern support. Bride Azel Load. Vow Stability Anchor. Lenora touched the hearthstone. The ring on her finger burned softly. The Ember Oath-Wall spoke from above, its voice, traveling down through the cracked foundation. Roof taken before settlement. Vauster called from the stairs. The dwelling was abandoned. Lenora closed her eyes once. Abandoned. Another soft word. Another clean cloth laid over a wound. I was exiled from it, she said. That is not abandonment. The chamber answered with a pulse of red light. From beneath the hearthstone, a narrow iron box slid out through the ash. Vaustor's breath caught. Lenora heard it. So did Calder. She knelt and opened the box before the prelate could invent a law against her fingers. Inside lay a folded roof deed sealed with Arlen's mark and her own widow ring impression. Beside it rested a strip of temple parchment already signed, already prepared. Lenora read the words aloud. Voluntary roof. Surrender upon placement of final ember brick. Ysmera's face hardened from the stare, prepared before she touched the brick. The oath plate flared. First debt unpaid, the wall said. False surrender prepared. Calder looked at the parchment as if he wanted to burn it out of the world by sight alone. Voustor. The prelate's voice came smooth from above. Standard preparation. Documents are made ready in advance of ritual completion. Lenora rose with the deed in one hand and the false surrender in the other. Then prepare this. She held the false surrender over the hearthstone. Her ring ignited. The parchment burned from the center outward, not into ash but into letters of red flame that lifted into the chamber. Roof, claim, still, living. The house shook, not collapsing, remembering. A line of fire moved across the buried floor tracing walls that were no longer there. Door bedchamber, pantry shelf, rain barrel. The small place near the hearth where Arlen had kept his boots. The outline surrounded Lenora, like a home returning only long enough to say it had not consented to becoming a wedding aisle. Calder stepped into the fire outline. The flames rose around his boots but did not touch him. What pays this debt? Lenora answered before the wall could. A roof I can stand under without temple permission. Calder looked at her. Granted. She met his eyes. Not granted. Owed. The correction struck him. He bowed his head once. Owed. The fire outline steadied. Above them, the cathedral groaned. The first debt was not finished, but it had been named properly. Voustor's voice sharpened. Majesty. Every payment made here weakens tomorrow's alliance. Bride house witnesses are present. Council witnesses are present. If you let a widow's claim outrank remarriage law, you invite every war widow in the kingdom to reopen settlement. Lenora looked up the stairs. Good. Silence fell. The word was not loud. It did not need to be. It reached the nave, the benches, the bride house balcony, the unfinished wall, and every person who had treated one widow as small enough to bury. Calder looked at her then, with something dangerous and new in his face. Not desire alone. Not pity. Respect that hurt because it arrived late. Then the hearthstone cracked. Inside it, wrapped in a strip of soldier cloth, was a small ash urn marked with Lenora Varrin's name. Lenora stopped breathing. Voustor whispered from above, Do not touch that. Calder's eyes turned to fire. Lenora lifted the urn with both hands, and the Ember Oath-Wall roared through the foundation. Grave tithe stolen before vow completion. Lenora held the urn as if any wrong breath might scatter the last proof that Lenora Varrin had not vanished into temple language. The chamber beneath the bride's path had gone silent, except for the low tremor of the Ember Oath-Wall above. The ash urn was small, too small for the grief tied to it wrapped in soldier cloth stiff with old soot. Arlen's name had been marked on the clay in a hand Lenora knew at once. Not Voustor's elegant temple script. Not a clerk's copy. A soldier's hand. Someone had tried before the theft was complete to keep Arlen from becoming foundation material. Lord Prelate Voustor Sile came down 3 steps and stopped when Calder turned toward him. That urn belongs to temple custody. Lenora looked up slowly. Voustor did not look at her. He addressed the king because men like him preferred to discuss widows as if they were furniture moved between rooms. A grave tithe paid into soldier vault falls under sacred administration. If the widow was exiled, custody remained with the cathedral until proper surrender. She was exiled by the same office that hid the oath, Calder said. Voustor's expression did not change. A legal exile still carries legal consequence. Lenora rose with the urn held against her breast. Then, read the consequence. The prelate's eyes narrowed. She took 1 step toward him. You called it custody. The wall called it stolen. Read what your custody did. Voustor's burned hand twitched inside his sleeve. There it was again, fear, not of grief but of record. Calder saw it. "Open the grave tithe register." "No," Valstor said. The word escaped too quickly. Lady Ismera's voice came from the stairs, cold as polished glass. That was not council prelate. That was panic. A few bride house witnesses murmured. Valstor's jaw tightened. Lenora walked past the outline of her buried home and climbed the first steps toward the nave. No one stopped her. The urn warmed in her hands, and her wedding ring pulsed against the clay as if answering something sealed within it. By the time she reached the main floor, the unfinished wall had turned deep red along its lower seams. The court saw the urn. Some looked away, not from respect, from discomfort. A widow's hunger could be ignored. A widow holding her husband's stolen ashes was harder to turn into paperwork. Valstor followed robes, whispering over the dust. If she opens grave records without temple sanction, every soldier vault in the kingdom becomes vulnerable to emotional claims. Lenora turned at the registry table. Good, the same word as before, sharper now. She set the urn on the table beside the oath plate, the roof deed, and the false surrender parchment's burned remains. Arlen did not die, so his ashes could be used to frighten me into obedience. Valstor lifted his chin. His ashes were preserved. The urn cracked. A thin line of red light appeared down its side. Not breaking. Answering. Inside, the Ember Oath-Wall flame gathered and spoke through the stone. Grave tithe paid from widow claim. Lenora's fingers went cold. Calder stepped closer. What does that mean? Lenora already knew, though part of her wished she did not. Grave tithe was owed from the war chest when a captain died under royal command. It kept a soldier's ashes named guarded and untouchable by debt court or temple exchange. If the tithe had been paid from her widow claim instead, then the temple had used her own compensation to rent protection for Arlen's remains, then threatened to revoke it when she refused surrender. Valstor had made her pay to keep what the king had already owed. The wall burned again. War chest withheld. A murmur spread through the nave. Calder's face became terrible. Valstor spoke quickly. The war chest was strained after Red Hollow. Temporary reassignment of funds preserved burial order. You charged her for royal debt, Calder said. I preserved the vault. You threatened to remove his ashes. Valstor's composure thinned, because she refused lawful completion. Lenora opened the grave tithe register before he could say more. The pages were thick black vellum edged in ember dust. She pressed Arlen's urn against the first sealed page. Her ring flared, and the register unlocked with a sound like a breath held too long. Names appeared. Not only Arlen's, dozens of soldier widows, small deductions, reassigned tithes, protection fees drawn from unpaid compensation, grave security transferred to Cathedral expansion account. Lenora stared at the list, and anger steadied her more than grief ever had. You did not only steal from me. Valstor's face hardened. Careful. No. Lenora lifted the register so the court could see the burning lines. You turned dead soldiers into temple income and made their widows pay ransom for ashes already owed protection by the crown. The Ember Oath-Wall roared. Several priests fell to their knees not from repentance but fear. The lower foundation glowed red beneath every bench built on stolen tithe money. Calder looked at the register, then at Lenora. What pays this debt? She did not answer at once. A lesser answer would have been simple: return Arlen's ashes to her, repay the tithe, punish the prelate. But the register had widened the wound. If she let the moment become only Arlen's restoration, Valstor would bury the others later, under smaller words. Lenora placed both hands on the urn. Grave tithe beyond temple seizure, she said. For Arlen Varrin and every Red Hollow soldier named in this register, their ashes cannot be used as debt threat income or surrender pressure again. Valstor hissed. You have no right to speak for every widow. No, Lenora said. But your own register does. Calder drew his dagger. Valstor stepped forward in alarm. Majesty, do not put royal flame into mass grave protection without council measure. Calder cut his palm across the old wound from the first payment. Blood welled dark and bright. Lenora stopped him with one word. Wait. He did. The court noticed. She looked at him. Do not make it mercy. His eyes held hers. Make it debt, she said. Calder bowed his head once, then pressed his bleeding hand to the open register. Dragonfire poured into the names. Not over them, not swallowing them under royal glory, but circling each one like a guard taking post. I mark what the crown owed, he said, voice rough. Not as gift, as debt. The register ignited white gold. One by one the stolen grave tithes burned free from temple account and returned to soldier protection. The urn in Lenora's hands cooled. For the first time since Arlen died, it felt like clay again, instead of leverage. The wall spoke. Third debt accepted. A visible hollow closed low in the foundation, sealing not with a bridal flame but with dozens of small soldier marks. Voustor stared at the closing stone with hatred bright in his eyes. Then the grave register flipped open by itself to a hidden final page. At the top in Voustor's private script burned a title, Widow Compensation Reassignment. Beneath it, Lenora saw her own name, and beside it, Calder's royal seal. Calder's blood stopped smoking on the grave register. That was the first sound Lenora noticed after the hidden page opened, not the court gasping, not Voustor's robes shifting, not Lady Ismera's sharp intake of breath from the bride house aisle. Only the soft hiss of royal flame cooling over restored soldier names, while another wound waited beneath the ink. Lenora stared at her own name on the final page. Widow Compensation Reassignment. Lenora Varrin. Amount owed under Red Hollow Flame Law unpaid. Transferred to Cathedral of Sleeping Flame, Eastern Expansion. Beneath the transfer, pressed deep into black vellum, was Calder Eth's royal mark. Not temple script, not priest shorthand. His dragon crest. For a moment, the cathedral seemed to lean toward him. Calder did not deny it. That made the court more afraid. A guilty king who defended himself could be argued with. A guilty king who stared at the mark as if it had opened inside his own chest, gave the truth too much room. Voustor moved quickly into that room. There is no scandal here. The war chest fell under royal emergency control after Red Hollow. His Majesty's authorization permitted reassignment of unsettled claims to public reconstruction. Public reconstruction, Lenora said. Her voice sounded strange to her, calm, almost distant. Voustor's eyes flashed. The cathedral shelters the kingdom's vows. Your compensation served holy stability. My husband's death bought your wall. No, Voustor said. The king's mark did. The words turned every face toward Calder. Lenora looked at him, too. She wanted rage to be simple. She wanted him to say it was forged, stolen, impossible. She wanted one clean villain in ash-black robes, and one king who had merely failed to see. But the wall had not opened to comfort her. It had opened to collect what was owed. Calder stepped closer to the page. I authorized emergency settlement after Red Hollow. Voustor bowed his head. As I said, Calder's eyes stayed on the transfer. I did not authorize widow claims to become temple property. But you did not forbid it, Lenora said. The sentence cut him before Voustor could. Calder looked at her. No anger, no command. Only the impact of a truth he had earned. No. Voustor's mouth tightened. Majesty, do not allow grief to rewrite governance. Emergency seals exist because kings cannot review every widow's purse. Lenora lifted the grave register, then let the wall read what his mark paid. Voustor's face changed. Not much. Enough. He reached for the silver trowel, still broken on the altar, and Lenora finally understood why he had kept it close. It was not only a ritual tool. Its edge was thin enough to scrape ink from vellum. Calder saw the movement, too. Drop it, he said. Voustor smiled without warmth. This record has become unstable under unsanctioned flame. He slashed the trowel toward the hidden page. Lenora pulled the register back, but the blade caught the lower corner. Black vellum split. Red light spilled from the cut like blood. Calder moved. He did not touch Lenora. He caught Vaustor's wrist and drove the prelate's hand down against the altar stone. The remaining half of the trowel clattered away. "I warned you about hands near her," Calder said. Vaustor's face twisted. "Near the book, Majesty. The book is her debt." Lenora felt that sentence enter the nave and change its balance. Not her grief, not her claim, her debt. The Ember Oath-Wall answered with a deep pulse. The torn page lifted from the register, hovering between Calder and Lenora. Fire ran along the cut Vaustor had made, not destroying it but widening the wound into letters. The compensation did not vanish into stone. It became cathedral weight. A low crack sounded overhead. The eastern arches sagged by a finger's breadth. A noble cried out. Priests stumbled from the benches. Lady Ismera looked up at the ceiling, built partly on unpaid widow compensation, and her polished composure finally broke into open disgust. Lenora stepped beneath the floating page, read the amount. Vaustor barked a laugh. "Coin cannot be read by a wall. The old vow is not memory," Lenora said. "It is debt," the wall responded. Numbers burned across the torn vellum, but not as treasury figures. The oath translated them into what had been taken 3 winters of roof tax seed grain. For the ash orchard, widow guard fee, grave, journey cost soldier pension, withheld compensation, converted interest under flame law public, dishonor penalty. The list kept growing. Vaustor's confidence thinned with each line. Calder watched until the final number settled. Then he removed the ember wire from his hair. The court stirred. Tomorrow's remarriage wire was not decoration. It was the first visible promise of the new vow. To remove it before the ceremony was an insult to bride house expectation and temple order both. He held it out to Lenora. She did not take it. His jaw tightened, not from offense but understanding. "This is not yours to give me as favor," she said. "No," he answered. "It is mine to surrender as payment." Lady Ismera's eyes narrowed. "That wire is pledged to my wedding rite." Calder turned to her. "Then you should know what stands beneath it before it binds you." Ismera looked at Lenora. The 2 women held each other's gaze across the broken nave, not as rivals, not as friends, but as 2 people suddenly forced to stand on opposite sides of a theft neither had written. Then Ismera lifted her chin. "Pay the debt. I will not wear stolen flame." Vaustor stared at her. "My lady, do not advise me from under a collapsing roof." The court fell silent. Lenora took the ember wire at last, but not into her palm. She laid it across the torn compensation page and pressed her wedding ring over both. Calder cut his palm again deeper this time and placed his bleeding hand beside hers, not over it. Dragonfire rose. The page burned white gold. Somewhere below the floor, metal chests unlocked. The sound came up through the cathedral stones, one lock, then another, then many more. Treasury bonds hidden in temple custody surfaced in flame across the register. Widow compensation reassigned to construction began to loosen from the wall itself. The eastern arch groaned, then steadied. The Ember Oath-Wall spoke. 4th debt. Accepted. Lenora exhaled, but relief did not reach her. One line remained burning across the floor. 5th debt. Public correction of dishonor spoken where dishonor was made. The nave doors slammed open by themselves. Beyond them, the city square blazed red with waiting flame, and every voice that had ever called Lenora Varrin an ungrateful widow began to whisper from the stones outside. The city square had been prepared for celebration, not judgment. Garlands of red flame cloth hung between black stone pillars. Bride house lanterns waited unlit along the procession road. A raised platform stood before the cathedral doors, where tomorrow the people were meant to cheer Calder Eth's remarriage, and watched the Cathedral of Sleeping Flame receive its final blessing. Now the doors stood open behind him, cracked foundation light pouring over the steps, and every decoration looked suddenly guilty of arriving too early. Lenora Varrin stopped at the threshold. The square was full, not with nobles this time. With merchants, ash road workers, temple servants, widows in dark veils, soldiers on leave and city folk who had come to glimpse royal splendor. These were the mouths that had carried Vaustor's sermons into every market lane. These were the ears that had heard Lenora named, bitter, unstable, grasping, ungrateful. Some recognized her at once and looked away. Others stared as if exile should have made her smaller than memory. The stones whispered beneath their feet, ungrateful widow, land thief, grief-mad, temple debtor. The words rose from the square because the wall had called them back. Every insult spoken there had soaked into the stones, and now the final debt demanded they be heard before they could be corrected. Vaustor descended the cathedral steps with controlled haste. Majesty, public correction must follow lawful form. The widow's grievances may be reviewed after remarriage, before a closed council. Lenora looked at the square. My dishonor was not closed. The whispers sharpened. Calder stood beside her bareheaded now, the ember wire gone from his hair and the old wound in his palm still open. He had paid in flame 4 times, but the hardest payment had not yet begun. Blood was easier than public truth. Fire could be given in a moment. Shame had to be named where power had profited from it. What does the 5th debt require? He asked. Lenora did not look at him. Not what you think. His face tightened. She heard the answer he had been ready to offer apology restoration decree. Those mattered. They were not enough. The square was told I lied, she said. The square will be told who lied first. Vaustor's voice cut in. Careful. If you turn temple sermon into public slander, you attack the faith of the city. No, Lenora said. I attack the theft hiding under it. A murmur moved through the crowd. Vaustor lifted both hands priestly again, injured palm wrapped in black cloth. People of Ethrain, you see what grief has done. A widow stands between your king and renewal. She has opened foundation, flame-disturbed soldier ashes, and challenged bridehouse law. If every battlefield promise becomes a weapon, no cathedral will stand, no remarriage will bind peace, no war debt will ever close. The crowd shifted. Fear was Vaustor's oldest mortar. He knew how to build with it. Lenora stepped onto the platform before Calder could answer. That mattered. The square had watched men speak over her too long. She lifted Arlen's urn in one hand and the oath plate in the other. My husband carried the king's left flank at Red Hollow. Calder Eth swore by royal flame that I would not be cast out. Roof land, grave tithe, and compensation were owed. Lord Prelate Vaustor Sile received the witness mark before burial. He sealed it under this cathedral, then called my claim grief. The stones beneath the platform flared. Not enough. The whispers continued. Ungrateful widow. Disputed land. Temple debtor. Lenora understood. The debt did not only require her to tell the truth, it required the person whose silence had made the lie powerful to correct it. She turned to Calder. The whole square turned with her. He looked at her, and the space between them held everything unsaid, the vow he remembered, the years he failed to ask after the court that used his mark, the attraction he did not dare confuse with repair. His guilt stood plain in his face now, but she would not let guilt become performance either. Do not speak for mercy, she said. Speak record. Calder bowed his head once. Then Dragon King Calder Eth stepped onto the platform and faced his city. The square went still. Lenora Varrin did not lie, he said. The words struck the stone. One whisper died. She did not steal land. Her land was taken under temple custody and bridehouse transfer before lawful surrender. Another whisper vanished. She did not abandon her husband's grave. His grave tithe was withheld from the war chest drawn from widow claim and used as leverage against her. The widows in the crowd lifted their veiled faces. She did not dishonor Captain Arlen Varrin. I dishonored him when I failed to see whether my oath had been kept. The platform trembled. Vauster's composure cracked. Majesty Calder's voice deepened. Lord Prelate Vaustor Sile buried the witness mark, converted widow right into cathedral property, and preached theft as obedience. The square erupted. Not cheers. Not yet. Sound broke in uneven waves, shock, denial, anger, grief. A woman near the fountain began to sob. An old soldier pulled off his cap and stared at the cathedral as if it had grown teeth. Several temple servants stepped away from Vaustor. The stones under Lenora's feet burned clean. For the first time in 2 years, the square held her name without spitting on it. Vaustor moved. He did not run. He turned toward the bride house witnesses, because when faith failed him, politics remained. If the king places public dishonor on temple record before remarriage, then the vow wall cannot receive a new queen tomorrow. The alliance contract fractures. Border houses withdraw. The sleeping flame rejects unstable authority. Lady Ismera Thorne ascended the platform slowly. Her face was pale, but her voice was clear. Do not hide behind my marriage prelate. Vaustor's eyes glittered. My lady, your bride house paid for stability, and you sold us stolen ground. The crowd heard that too. Lenora saw Vaustor's last mask fall. He lifted the broken silver trowel from inside his sleeve. Its edge glowed black, where it had scraped the register. Then let the wall decide which debt matters, more one widow's grievance, or the kingdom's peace. He drove the trowel into the platform. Black flame shot across the square, racing toward the cathedral foundation. The open wall roared behind them. The final hollow above the marriage dais blazed red, pulling at Lenora's ring. Calder's blood, Ismera's vow silk, and every unpaid widow mark in the crowd. Vaustor's voice rang over the panic. If the widow's dishonor is corrected, every buried war claim wakes. The square stones split. Hundreds of small ember marks began to glow beneath the feet of veiled women across the crowd. Lenora looked down. The 5th debt had not been the last. It had been the first one spoken aloud. The square did not scream all at once. First came silence. Then came the sound of women looking down. Beneath black mourning, skirts, patched hems, noble veils, servant aprons, and ash-road boots. Ember marks woke in the stones like coals under old snow. One by one they shaped themselves into names. Not bright enough to blind, bright enough to accuse. Husband names, brother names, sons, captains, border riders, men buried beneath clean temple entries, while their widows were told the war chest had emptied. The records had failed. The king's promise had been only mourning. Lenora Varrin stood at the center of it, with Arlen's urn in one hand and the oath plate in the other, and understood the terrible mercy of the Ember Oath-Wall. It had not opened only because she was special. It had opened because her unpaid debt had been used as the final brick over many others. Vaustor Sile saw it too. His face for the first time held no priestly calm. You will break the realm, he said, voice raw. If every widow claims flame debt, the treasury bleeds dry. Temples lose ground. Bride houses withdraw. Border peace fails. Lenora looked at the glowing marks beneath the widow's feet. Then the realm was standing on their bones. The words moved through the square faster than fire. Calder Eth turned slowly toward the crowd. The public correction had stripped something from him that no wound in battle ever had. His crownless hair was dark with sweat, his palm still bleeding. The ember wire gone, the new marriage vow suspended behind him like a held breath. Yet he did not look smaller. He looked less protected by lies. Vaustor lifted the broken trowel again. Black flame crawled along its edge. Majesty command the wall shut. Now, pay this widow if you must. Silence the rest before the cathedral collapses. Lenora felt Calder's gaze shift to her. A year ago, she might have mistaken that look for hesitation. Now she saw the question inside it, not asking permission to rule, asking where the debt truly stood. She answered before he spoke. "Do not close it." The crowd stilled. Lenora stepped to the edge of the platform. "If you close it now, you bury them again. If you pay only me, you make me the lucky wound and leave the others to rot under stone." Valstor laughed harshly. Listen to her. She would spend the kingdom to clothe grief. "No," Lenora said. "I would make the kingdom stop calling theft stability." The Ember Oath-Wall roared from inside the cathedral. Its flame poured through the open doors, raced down the steps, and spread across the square in thin red lines. The marks beneath the widows answered each one, forming a small hollow in the stone. Debt-locks, not demands for pity, legal places waiting for payment record and correction. Calder faced Valstor. "You knew." The prelate's mouth tightened. "You knew the wall would wake if Lenora's debt remained unpaid. You knew the final brick would bury not only her claim but the pattern beneath it." Valstor's eyes turned cold again, finding arrogance where calm had failed. "I knew the kingdom required order." "You mean silence?" "I mean rule." Calder descended from the platform and stopped before him. "Then hear mine." He took the broken silver trowel from Valstor's hand. The prelate tried to hold it. The trowel burned black in his grip. He cried out and released it. Calder held it up for the square to see. "Lord Prelate Valstor Sile is stripped of temple custody land, authority, burial record, vow construction, and widow settlement." Valstor staggered as if the words had struck flesh. Calder continued, voice carrying over every lit mark. "The Cathedral of Sleeping Flame is suspended from royal remarriage until every foundation debt is read. All Red Hollow widow claims will be reopened before soldier witnesses, widow holders, and crown flame. No temple record may bury a battlefield oath without public mark again." A sound rose from the crowd. Not cheering. Breathing. Hundreds of people breathing, as if a roof had lifted from their chests. Valstor's face twisted. "You will lose the bride house." Lady Ismera Thorne stepped down from the platform, pale vow silk trailing over cracked stone. She looked first at the glowing widow marks, then at the unfinished cathedral, then at Lenora. "My house wanted alliance," she said. "Not a marriage laid over stolen flame." Valstor stared at her. "You withdraw?" "I refuse to be sealed into a lie." Her gaze moved to Calder. "If the alliance survives, it will survive honest record. If it does not, it was weaker than your priests promised." The bride house witnesses murmured, but none contradicted her. The Ember Oath-Wall spoke again, deeper than before. "Fifth debt ready." Lenora turned back to the cathedral. The final hollow above the marriage dais still burned open. The lower debts had been paid into foundation. Roof begun, land named, grave tithe restored, compensation released, public dishonor corrected. One thing remained, the lie that she had surrendered willingly. Valstor saw the direction of her eyes. "Do not let her touch the brick." No one obeyed him. Lenora walked down from the platform and crossed the square toward the cathedral. Calder followed at a careful distance, not behind, like a penitent shadow. Not beside her, as if he had earned that place fully. Near enough to witness, far enough not to claim. The final ember brick waited where the wall had pulled it, still marked with surrender script, though the black lines now flickered weakly. Lenora lifted it. Pain shot through her hands, but this time the brick did not drag her toward obedience. It waited for her decision. She carried it to the open wall. Valstor screamed from the square. If she refuses the surrender, the cathedral remains unfinished. Lenora turned with the brick in her hands. Then let it remain unfinished until every debt beneath it can stand in daylight. She pressed her wedding ring to the brick. The surrender script burned away. Not into ash. Into Arlen's name. Then into Lenora's. Then into the words Calder had spoken over the dead and failed to guard. By my flame his widow will not be cast out. Calder stepped forward and placed his bleeding palm against the stone beside hers. By my flame, he said, voice rough enough to break. No widow sworn under this crown will be cast out by buried record again. The wall accepted the words. The brick changed. Not surrender. Not remarriage. Record. Lenora placed it into the lower foundation beside the other paid debts, not the high hollow meant for display. The stone sealed with a sound like a door opening somewhere far away. The Cathedral of Sleeping Flame did not collapse. It changed shape. The eastern wall pulled back from stolen ground, leaving an open arch where Arlen's roof had been buried. The bride's path broke into 3 roads, one toward the marriage dais, one toward the soldier vault, and one toward the city square, where widow marks still glowed waiting to be read. The wall spoke one final time. Old debt acknowledged. New vows delayed until payment stands. Voustor fell to his knees. Not in prayer, because the stones beneath him had opened, revealing rows of hidden records sealed in ash-black tubes. Temple transfers, widow surrenders, buried witness marks. Enough truth to unmake his life's work. Calder ordered him taken before he could reach the records. No priest defended him. By dusk, Arlen's urn had been returned to Lenora's hands under royal guard, not temple custody. The false surrender was burned in the square, where the lie had first been preached. The roof debt was marked for restoration on land, not swallowed by holy stone. Compensation was placed under widow witness, not court steward. And the cathedral remained unfinished, its open wall glowing softly like a wound cleaned but not yet closed. Only then did Calder come to Lenora beneath the new arch. "I cannot ask forgiveness tonight," he said. "No," she answered. He nodded, accepting the truth without flinching. "Then I ask what debt remains between us." Lenora looked at him for a long moment. The draw between them had been there since the wall opened dangerous, because grief and power could mimic many things. She would not let attraction replace justice. She would not let his guilt become love before repair had learned to walk. At dawn, she said, "You will begin reading the other names." "I will. Not as mercy, as debt." She looked toward the open wall where ember light moved like a sleeping heart. "And after that, perhaps we will learn what remains when neither of us is standing inside a buried oath." Calder's eyes held hers. For the first time, the heat between them did not feel like danger stealing breath. It felt like flame kept at the proper distance, waiting to warm what it had once failed to protect. He reached toward her hand, then stopped. Lenora saw the pause. She chose. Her fingers closed around his, not as surrender, not as forgiveness, but as the first honest touch, after a vow had finally been given back its name. Behind them, the Ember Oath-Wall did not close. It burned open, and all through the city widows began walking toward the light.